The rain came down in sheets that October evening in Brooklyn, the kind of downpour that turned the streets into rivers and sent everyone running for cover. The neon sign of Rosie's Diner flickered weakly against the storm, its pink glow barely visible through the curtain of water streaming down from the dark sky. Inside, the warm yellow lights created a small island of comfort in the cold, wet darkness that had settled over the neighborhood. Emma Carter moved methodically through her closing routine, her white sneakers squeaking softly against the black and white checkered floor. At 27, she had the kind of tired beauty that came from too many double shifts and not enough sleep. Dark circles under her hazel eyes, blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, and the weary posture of someone who'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight. Her pale blue uniform dress, standard issue for Rosie's Diner, had coffee stains on the hem and a small tear near the pocket that she kept meaning to fix but never had time for. Just a few more minutes, she whispered to herself, wiping down the last booth by the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see the lights of passing cars, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. The diner was located on a quiet corner of Park Slope, a neighborhood that had seen better days but still retained a certain shabby dignity. Across the street, the old brick buildings stood shoulder to shoulder, their fire escapes zigzagging down their facades like iron veins. Emma had worked at Rosie's for 3 years now, ever since she'd moved to Brooklyn from her hometown in Ohio. The diner wasn't much, just a long counter with red vinyl stools, 8 booths with cracked leather seats, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked in years. But it was hers in a way. She knew every crack in the ceiling, every stubborn stain on the floor, every quirk of the ancient coffee maker that sputtered and hissed like an angry cat. The kitchen was already clean, thanks to Miguel, the night cook who'd left 30 minutes ago, muttering something about his daughter's school play. Emma was alone now, just her and the sound of rain hammering against the roof. She liked these quiet moments after closing, when the chaos of the dinner rush had faded and she could breathe without feeling like she was drowning in orders and complaints. She was reaching for the light switch behind the counter when she heard it, the sound of the front door bursting open with such force that the little bell above it went flying across the room, clattering against the wall. Emma spun around, her heart jumping into her throat. 3 small figures stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm. They were children, little girls, and they were completely soaked. Water streamed from their dark hair, pooled around their small feet, and dripped from the expensive-looking coats they wore. But it wasn't the rain that made Emma's chest tighten with alarm. It was the terror in their eyes. The 3 girls couldn't have been more than 5 years old, and they were identical. Triplets, Emma realized with a jolt. They had the same heart-shaped faces, the same large, dark eyes, the same trembling lips. And they were crying, not the tantrum crying of overtired children, but the desperate, gasping sobs of pure fear. "Please," the girl in the middle choked out, her voice breaking. "Please help us." Emma's training, her exhaustion, her plans to go home and collapse into bed, all of it evaporated in an instant. She vaulted over the counter with an agility that surprised even her sneakers hitting the floor with a soft thud, and rushed to the children. "Oh my God, sweethearts, what happened?" Emma dropped to her knees in front of them, not caring that the water from their clothes was soaking into her uniform. "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" The girls didn't answer. Instead, they moved as one, throwing their small arms around Emma and burying their faces in her shoulders. Their bodies shook with cold and fear, and Emma could feel their rapid heartbeats against her chest like the wings of trapped birds. "It's okay. It's okay," Emma murmured, wrapping her arms around all 3 of them. "You're safe now. I've got you." She looked toward the open door, expecting to see a frantic parent or guardian rushing in after them, but the street was empty except for the rain. The storm seemed to have intensified, the wind howling through the doorway and bringing with it a spray of cold water. Emma carefully disentangled herself from the girls, hurried to close and lock the door, then turned back to them. They stood huddled together in a small cluster, shivering violently. Now that Emma could see them more clearly in the diner's light, she noticed details that made her stomach twist with concern. Their clothes were expensive, designer coats, polished shoes, matching dresses underneath, but they were dirty and disheveled. One girl had a scrape on her knee, another had what looked like a red mark on her wrist, as if someone had grabbed her too roughly. All 3 had that hollow, haunted look that children should never have. "Okay, first things first," Emma said, forcing her voice to stay calm and steady even though her mind was racing with questions and worry. "Let's get you warm and dry." She guided them to the booth farthest from the door, the one she always thought of as the cozy corner, because it was tucked away and felt safe. The girls moved slowly, their small hands clutching at Emma's uniform, as if afraid she might disappear. Once they were seated, pressed together on one side of the booth, Emma rushed to the supply closet and grabbed every clean towel she could find. "Here we go," she said, returning with an armful of white towels. She began gently drying their hair, her movements careful and soothing. "Can you tell me your names?" The girl on the left, who had a small mole just above her right eyebrow, looked up at Emma with enormous eyes. "I'm Lily," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," Emma said softly, moving to the middle girl. "Rose," the middle one said, her voice barely audible. "And I'm Violet," the third girl added, and Emma noticed she had a slight gap between her front teeth. "Lily, Rose, and Violet," Emma repeated, her heart aching at the floral names. "Those are lovely names. I'm Emma. You're very brave girls to come find help." "We didn't know where else to go," Lily said, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Everything was so scary and loud and—" "Shh, it's all right," Emma interrupted gently. "You don't have to talk about it right now if you don't want to. Let's just focus on getting you warm, okay?" She went behind the counter and started making hot chocolate, the real kind, with milk and cocoa powder and a generous amount of tiny marshmallows. As the milk heated on the stove, Emma found herself glancing repeatedly at the girls. They sat completely still, their eyes fixed on her every movement as if terrified she might leave them. What could have happened to make 3 children this scared? And where were their parents? Emma's mind flashed to her own little sister Sophie, who would have been 23 now if she'd lived. Sophie had that same fragile vulnerability, that same need for protection. Emma had failed her sister 9 years ago. She'd been driving the car when the drunk driver ran the red light, but she wouldn't fail these girls. Whatever was happening, whoever had frightened them, Emma would make sure they were safe. "Here we are," Emma said, bringing over 3 mugs of hot chocolate. She'd been careful not to fill them too full, and she'd put them in the diner's smaller cups so the girls could hold them more easily. "Careful, it's hot, but it'll warm you right up." The girls wrapped their small hands around the mugs, and Emma saw some of the tension leave their shoulders as the warmth seeped into their fingers. They took small, cautious sips, and Rose got a marshmallow mustache that would have been adorable under different circumstances. Emma slid into the booth across from them, keeping her posture open and non-threatening. "Girls, I need to ask you something important. Is there someone I should call? Parents, a guardian? Someone who's probably really worried about you?" The reaction was immediate and alarming. All 3 girls tensed, and Violet's eyes went wide with panic. "No," Rose said urgently, almost spilling her hot chocolate. "You can't call them, you can't." Okay, Emma said quickly, holding up her hands. "I won't call anyone you don't want me to call. But sweethearts, you have to understand, 3 little girls showed up at my diner alone in a storm. I need to make sure you're supposed to be with me and not somewhere else." "We ran away," Lily admitted, staring down at her hot chocolate. From the house." "What house?" Emma asked gently. "Our aunt's house," Violet said. "Aunt Rebecca. She was yelling so loud and her boyfriend was there and they were saying bad things and we got scared," Rose finished. "So we ran. We just ran and ran until we saw the lights here." Emma's chest felt tight. 3 5-year-old girls running alone through Brooklyn in a storm, desperate enough to seek refuge in a random diner. Whatever had been happening at that house, it must have been terrifying. "You were very smart to come somewhere safe," Emma said, "and very brave, but your aunt is probably looking for you." "He'll come," Lily interrupted, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "He always comes. Aunt Rebecca said he would." "Who?" Emma asked. But before any of the girls could answer, Rose spoke, her eyes locked on something behind Emma. "He's here." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emma turned slowly, her body already moving to place itself between the girls and whatever threat had arrived. Standing just outside the front door, visible through the rain-streaked glass, was a man. Even through the distortion of water and glass, Emma could see he was tall, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders encased in what looked like an expensive black suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and despite the storm, he seemed utterly composed. He wasn't trying the door yet. He was just standing there, looking in, his dark eyes scanning the interior of the diner with an intensity that made Emma's survival instincts scream. Behind him, Barely visible in the darkness, Emma could make out at least two more figures and the sleek shapes of black SUVs parked at the curb. No one parked SUVs like that, with that kind of precision and obvious coordination, unless they were used to working together, unless they were used to this kind of situation. The man's eyes found the booth where Emma and the girl sat. Even from this distance, Emma felt the weight of his gaze. It was calculating, dangerous, and something else she couldn't quite name. Then he moved, reaching for the door handle. The locked door rattled but didn't open. Emma made a split-second decision. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, keeping her eyes on the man. "Girls, I need you to stay very quiet and very still, okay? Don't move from this booth." "That's our daddy," Violet whispered, and Emma's hand froze halfway to dialing 911. "That's what?" "Our daddy," Lily repeated, and there was such a complex mixture of emotions in her voice. Fear, longing, confusion. Dominic Russo. The name hit Emma like a physical blow. Dominic Russo. Even someone who'd only been in Brooklyn for 3 years knew that name. The Russo family had been fixtures in New York for generations, their influence spreading through the city like roots through concrete. They were in construction, real estate, shipping. At least those were the legitimate businesses everyone knew about. But there were whispers of other ventures, darker enterprises, the kind of things people discussed in lowered voices and quickly changed subjects about when strangers approached. And this man, standing outside her diner in the rain, demanding entry, was allegedly the current head of the Russo family. Young, ruthless, and, according to the newspapers, currently embroiled in a custody battle that had been making headlines for weeks. Emma's mind raced. If these were his daughters, she had no legal right to keep them from him. But the terror in their eyes when they'd burst through her door, the way they'd clung to her, the marks on their skin, something wasn't right here. Something had made 3 children afraid enough to run into a storm, away from their own father. The man outside pulled out a phone and Emma's cell buzzed a second later. An unknown number. She answered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Open the door." His voice was deep, controlled, with the kind of quiet authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed instantly. "I don't think I will," Emma said, her free hand finding Rose's shoulder in a protective gesture. "Not until I know what's going on here." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Emma could practically hear him recalibrating, adjusting to the unexpected resistance. "Those are my daughters. I have legal custody. Open the door, or I'll open it myself. Then you'll be breaking and entering into a private business," Emma said, surprised by her own courage. "And I'll call the police." "The police won't help you," he said, and there was no threat in his voice, just a statement of fact that somehow made it worse. "I own half of Brooklyn. Those officers you'd call, I went to school with them, I've known them for 20 years, they know who I am and they know those are my daughters." "Then you have nothing to worry about if I call them," Emma countered. "Right?" Another pause. Emma could see him through the glass, his jaw tightening. Behind her she heard one of the girls, Lily she thought, whimper softly. "Miss?" he prompted. "Carter." "Emma Carter." "Miss Carter. I understand you're trying to protect them. I even appreciate it. But this is a family matter and you're making it more complicated than it needs to be. Open the door." "Why are they afraid of you?" Emma asked bluntly. "Because Mr. Russo, I've seen a lot of kids come through this diner, and I've never seen any look as terrified as your daughters did when they came running in here." The silence that followed was different, heavier, weighted with something Emma couldn't identify. When Dominic Russo spoke again, his voice had changed subtly, the authority layered with something that might have been pain. "That's complicated and private, but I'm their father, and I've been looking for them for 2 hours. Their aunt called me in a panic. They ran out in the middle of a storm, Miss Carter. Do you have any idea how many things could have happened to them out there?" He had a point, and Emma knew it, but she also knew what she'd seen in those girls' eyes. "Then come in. Just you. Leave your associates outside, and we'll talk about this." She could see his shoulders tense, see the barely controlled frustration in the set of his jaw. He was a man used to giving orders, not negotiating with diner waitresses. But after a long moment he nodded. He turned to the men behind him, said something Emma couldn't hear, then faced the door again. Emma took a deep breath, looked back at the girls one more time. They were watching her with a mixture of hope and fear, then walked to the door. Her hand shook slightly as she turned the lock. The moment the door opened, Dominic Russo stepped inside. and Emma realized that seeing him through glass had not prepared her for the reality of his presence. He was younger than she'd expected, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of sharp, angular features that would have been handsome if they weren't set in such a hard expression. His suit was indeed expensive, tailored perfectly to his frame, now spotted with rain. His eyes were dark, almost black in the diner's lighting, and they swept the room with the practiced assessment of someone trained to identify threats. Those eyes landed on Emma, and she felt evaluated, catalogued, and judged in the span of a heartbeat. Then they moved past her to the booth, and something in his expression cracked. Just for a second, just enough for Emma to see the raw emotion underneath. Lily, Rose, Violet. His voice was softer now. Careful. It's time to come home. None of the girls moved. They pressed closer together, and Emma saw Rose grab her sister's hands. Dominic took a step forward, and Emma moved without thinking, placing herself between him and the booth. She was a full foot shorter than him and probably weighed 60 pounds less, but she stood her ground, her chin lifted in defiance. "Stop," she said. "You're scaring them more." For a moment, Emma thought he might simply push past her. She could see the muscles in his jaw working, see the calculation in his eyes. But he stopped, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "They're my daughters," he said again, but this time there was a crack in the armor, a note of desperation, of pain. "I would never hurt them." "Then why are they afraid?" Emma challenged. "Why did they run? Why are there marks on their skin?" His eyes flashed with something, anger, but not at Emma. At himself? At the situation? "Those marks aren't from me. They're from their aunt's boyfriend, who grabbed them when they tried to leave. I've been searching for them since Rebecca called. Do you think I wanted them out there? In a storm? Running through streets they don't know in a neighborhood that isn't safe after dark?" Emma wanted to believe him. There was genuine anguish in his voice, genuine fear for his children. But she'd learned the hard way that people could lie with emotion in their voices. Sophie's boyfriend had sounded devastated when he'd apologized for the bruises, too. "Girls?" Emma said, not taking her eyes off Dominic Russo. "Is this your father?" "Yes," came the small chorus of voices. "Do you want to go with him?" The silence that followed was devastating. Emma could hear the rain, the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter, the distant sound of traffic. But from the booth, there was only silence. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice trembling. "Daddy's always angry, and Aunt Rebecca said he doesn't want us. She said we're in the way. She said, that's not true." Dominic's voice was raw, and Emma saw his hands shaking. Actually shaking. "That's not, God, that's not true. Lily, Rose, Violet, look at me, please." Slowly, the girls looked up. Emma watched Dominic Russo, this man who reportedly controlled a criminal empire, this man who had intimidated her moments ago, dropped to his knees on the dirty diner floor. He was eye level with his daughters now, his expensive suit soaking up water from the floor, his composure completely shattered. "Your Aunt Rebecca lied to you," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "I do want you. I've always wanted you, and I know I haven't been the father you deserve. I've been angry and distant, and I've made so many mistakes. But I love you, all three of you, more than anything in this world." "But you're never there," Violet said, tears streaming down her face. "You're always working. You didn't come to our birthday. You didn't come when Mommy—" Her voice broke, and the grief that filled the diner was palpable. Emma felt her own eyes burning with tears. She'd read about this in the papers. Dominic Russo's ex-wife had died in a car accident 6 months ago. The custody battle for the triplets had been ongoing ever since. "I know," Dominic said, and there were tears in his eyes too now. "I know, baby, and I hate myself for it. Your mother, when she died, I didn't know how to be what you needed. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I kept everything running smoothly, if I protected you from a distance, that would be enough. But it wasn't, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma stood frozen, watching this moment unfold. This wasn't what she'd expected. This wasn't the cold, calculating mob boss the newspapers portrayed. This was a broken man, a grieving father, someone who'd lost his way and was desperately trying to find it again. "Miss Carter," Dominic said, looking up at her. The vulnerability in his eyes was startling. "I understand why you don't trust me. I understand why they don't trust me. But I'm asking you, please, let me take my daughters home. Let me prove to them that I can do better, that I will do better." Emma looked at the girls. They were watching their father with such conflicting emotions: fear, longing, hope, uncertainty. These were children who'd lost their mother, who'd been shuttled between an absent father and a neglectful aunt, who'd been through more trauma in 5 years than most people experienced in a lifetime. "I have a proposition," Emma heard herself say, and everyone looked at her in surprise, including herself. "The girls stay with me tonight. Here upstairs I have an apartment above the diner. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. you come back. Bring proof of custody. Bring references, bring whatever you need to show me you're serious about being their father. And if the girls want to go with you, then they can." "That's not," Dominic started, rising to his feet, but Emma cut him off. "That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Because right now, Mr. Russo, I don't care how much of Brooklyn you own or how many connections you have. These girls need time to process everything that's happened tonight. They need to feel safe, and rushing them out into the storm with a father they barely know isn't going to accomplish that." Emma could see him struggle with it, could see the alpha male impulse to simply take what was his, balanced against the dawning realization that she was right. The girls needed time. They needed to feel in control of something in their chaotic lives. "You could take them by force," Emma continued quietly. "You could intimidate me, threaten me, override everything I'm saying. But is that the kind of father you want to be? Is that what you want them to remember about tonight?" Dominic Russo closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the dangerous edge had returned, but it was tempered now with something else. Respect, maybe, or resignation. "Fine," he said, "but I have conditions. One of my men stays outside all night. For protection, not surveillance. This neighborhood isn't as safe as you might think." "Agreed," Emma said. "And I want to see where they'll be sleeping. I want to make sure it's safe, clean, appropriate." "Also agreed. And at 9 a.m. tomorrow, I'm coming back. And Miss Carter, if anything happens to them while they're in your care—" "Nothing will," Emma said firmly. "I promise you that." He studied her for a long moment, and Emma had the unsettling feeling she was being thoroughly analyzed, her every micro-expression catalogued and assessed. Then, slowly, he nodded. 9 a.m., he repeated. He turned to his daughters. "Girls, I want you to listen to Miss Carter tonight, okay? And tomorrow we're going to talk. Really talk. About everything. And I'm going to prove to you that you can trust me again." "Okay, Daddy," Lily said in a small voice, and something in Dominic's expression broke all over again. He moved toward them, slowly, and when none of them pulled away, he carefully wrapped his arms around all three. It was awkward. He clearly wasn't used to this kind of physical affection, but it was also achingly tender. Emma had to look away, the intimacy of the moment too raw. When Dominic Russo finally stood and walked to the door, his eyes were red, but his jaw was set with determination. He paused at the threshold, looking back at Emma. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for protecting them, even from me." Then he was gone, stepping back into the storm. Through the window, Emma could see him talking to his men, see them disperse except for one who took up position near the black SUV. Then Dominic himself climbed into the vehicle and drove away, his taillights disappearing into the rain. Emma locked the door and turned back to the girls. They were watching her with enormous eyes, and suddenly the weight of what she'd just done crashed down on her. She'd just inserted herself into the middle of a custody dispute involving one of the most powerful families in New York. She'd just promised to protect 3 traumatized children overnight. She'd just gone toe-to-toe with a man who could probably make her life very difficult if he wanted to. But when she looked at Lily, Rose, and Violet, still huddled together in that booth with their hot chocolate, she knew she'd made the right choice. "All right, girls," Emma said, forcing brightness into her voice. "How about we go upstairs, get you into some warm pajamas, and figure out where everyone's sleeping, and maybe we can watch a movie? I have a whole collection of princess movies." "Can we watch all of them?" Rose asked tentatively. "We can watch as many as you want," Emma promised. "It's going to be an adventure, a sleepover adventure." As the girls climbed out of the booth and reached for her hands, Emma sent up a silent prayer that she hadn't just made a terrible mistake. But when Violet squeezed her hand and smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from any of them, she felt a warmth in her chest that had been absent since Sophie died. Maybe this was her second chance. Maybe this was her opportunity to protect someone the way she hadn't been able to protect her sister. Or maybe this was the beginning of something much bigger than she could possibly imagine. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and somewhere in Brooklyn, Dominic Russo sat in his car, staring at his phone and wondering how a single waitress had managed to do what no one else had done in 2 years. Make him question everything about the man he'd become. Tomorrow, Emma thought, as she led the girls upstairs to her small apartment. Tomorrow, we figure out the rest. But tonight, 3 little girls would sleep safely, surrounded by warmth and care and the promise that someone, somewhere, was willing to stand up for them. And in a world that had been so dark for so long, that was a start. The apartment above Rosie's diner was small, but Emma had made it home. A modest living room with a worn sofa faced a television mounted on the wall. The kitchen was barely bigger than a closet, but it was clean and organized. Down the short hallway were a bathroom and Emma's bedroom, which now felt inadequate for housing 3 unexpected guests. Wow, Violet breathed as they entered, her eyes wide. It's so cozy. Emma smiled despite her exhaustion. It's not much, but it's comfortable. Now let's see about getting you all into something dry and warm. The girls stood uncertainly in the middle of the living room, still dripping onto the hardwood floor. Emma realized they didn't have any clothes, no pajamas, nothing. She thought quickly, then headed to her bedroom and returned with 3 of her softest t-shirts, one with a faded university logo, another with a coffee cup graphic, and a third that simply said Brooklyn in cursive letters. These will be like dresses on you, Emma said, but they're clean and warm. How about you all change in the bathroom and I'll make us some popcorn? 20 minutes later, the triplets were curled up on Emma's sofa, drowning in her oversized shirts, with blankets tucked around them. Their hair was still damp but brushed, and their small faces were finally starting to lose some of that haunted look. Emma had found an animated movie about a princess and a dragon, and the girls were watching it with the kind of intense focus that suggested they were trying very hard not to think about anything else. Emma stood in the kitchen, watching them from over the counter as she prepared popcorn on the stove. Her mind was racing. What had she gotten herself into? She'd essentially kidnapped 3 children from one of the most powerful men in Brooklyn. Well, not kidnapped exactly. He'd agreed to the arrangement, but still, tomorrow morning would bring a reckoning of some kind. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting it to be Sarah, her best friend and fellow waitress, but the number was unknown. Against her better judgment, Emma answered. Miss Carter. It was Dominic Russo's voice, quieter now, less authoritative than it had been in the diner. I wanted to make sure they got upstairs safely. They did, Emma said, keeping her voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. They're watching a movie right now. Mr. Russo, are they eating? Do they need anything? Food? Clothes? Medicine? I can have anything delivered within the hour. The concern in his voice was genuine, Emma realized. This wasn't a performance. We're making popcorn right now. For tonight, they're fine. Tomorrow we can talk about the rest. There was a long pause. Emma could hear traffic in the background on his end, the sound of the city at night. I need you to understand something, Miss Carter. Those girls, they're everything. They're all I have left of her. Her? Emma asked, though she already knew. My ex-wife, Sophia. His voice roughened on the name. We divorced 3 years ago. She couldn't handle the life I was born into, the expectations, the dangers that came with the family name. I understood. I even agreed with her. But I thought if I gave them space, if I kept my distance, they'd be safer. I thought I was protecting them. Emma leaned against the counter, the phone pressed to her ear. What changed? Sophia died. Car accident. 6 months ago. Some drunk driver ran a red light in Manhattan. The pain in his voice was raw, unfiltered. She was gone instantly, and suddenly these 3 little girls who barely knew me became my responsibility. I was their father, but I'd been absent for so long that I was practically a stranger to them. That must have been terrifying, Emma said softly. For all of you. I didn't know what to do. My work, the family business, it demanded so much time. I had meetings in the middle of the night, situations that required my immediate attention, problems that couldn't wait. So I thought, Sophia's sister Rebecca offered to take them. She lived in a nice house in Queens, she wasn't working, she seemed like the logical choice. Temporary until I could get everything organized. Emma's chest tightened. But it wasn't temporary. No. Rebecca kept finding reasons why the girls needed to stay longer and God help me, I let it happen. I told myself they were better off with her, that they needed a woman's influence, that I couldn't be what they needed. But the truth is, I was afraid. I was afraid I'd fail them the way I'd failed their mother. From the living room, Emma heard one of the girls laugh at something in the movie. It was a small sound, fragile, but it was there. She wondered if Dominic could hear it too. "Mr. Russo, can I ask you something honestly?" "Dominic, please." And yes. Why were they so scared of you? Those girls were terrified when they ran into my diner. If you would never harm them, why that level of fear?" The silence that followed was so long that Emma thought he might have hung up. But then he spoke, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I'm always angry. Not at them, never at them. But they don't understand that. They see me on the phone, handling problems, dealing with the business, and my voice gets hard and my face gets cold and I become him. I become my father, the man I swore I'd never be." Emma closed her eyes. She understood, perhaps more than he realized. Her own father had been a good man who'd brought his work stress home, who'd snapped at dinner and brooded through weekends. It had taken Emma years to understand that his anger wasn't about her, that she wasn't the cause of his unhappiness. These girls were only 5. They couldn't make those distinctions yet. "And Rebecca?" Emma prompted. "She poisoned them against me." The anger was back in his voice now, sharp and bitter. "I didn't realize it at first. But over the past 6 months, every time I visited, the girls were more distant. They wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't look at me, flinched when I tried to touch them. Finally, 2 weeks ago, Lily let something slip. She said, 'Aunt Rebecca says you don't want us anymore.' When I confronted Rebecca about it, she denied everything. But I knew. I started the custody proceedings immediately." "What happened tonight?" Emma asked. "Why did they run?" "Rebecca called me at 7 p.m., hysterical. Said the girls had disappeared, that she'd looked everywhere. I mobilized everyone I could, searched the neighborhood, questioned people. It took me 2 hours to track them to your diner. 2 hours of not knowing if they were safe, if someone had taken them, if they were lying hurt somewhere." His voice broke. "Do you have any idea what that feels like, Miss Carter? To know your children are out there in danger and you can't find them?" "Emma," she said quietly. "Call me Emma. And no, I don't have children. But I had a little sister once. And I failed to protect her. So I think I understand some of what you're feeling." She hadn't meant to share that, but it slipped out, carried on a wave of empathy for this complicated, broken man on the other end of the line. "What happened to her?" Dominic asked, his voice gentle now. "Car accident 9 years ago. I was driving." Emma swallowed hard. "A drunk driver. Just like with your ex-wife. Some coincidences are too cruel to be anything but fate's sick joke." "I'm sorry," Dominic said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I'm sorry, Emma." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 strangers connected by shared grief and the presence of 3 sleeping children. Emma looked over at the girls. Rose had fallen asleep against Lily's shoulder, and Violet was fighting to keep her eyes open, her small body curling into the cushions. "They're falling asleep," Emma said softly. "I should go. Will you call me if they need anything? Anything at all? I don't care what time it is. I will. I promise. And Emma, thank you for standing up to me tonight, for protecting them, even from me. I know I'm not making this easy, but thank you." After they hung up, Emma stood in the kitchen for a long moment processing everything. The popcorn had finished popping, but she'd forgotten about it. When she finally brought the bowl to the living room, all 3 girls were asleep, tangled together like puppies in a pile of blankets. Emma carefully turned off the TV, checked that the door was locked, and settled into the armchair across from the sofa. She wouldn't sleep much tonight, partly from worry, partly from the uncomfortable chair, but mostly from the weight of responsibility that had settled on her shoulders. These girls were depending on her. Dominic was depending on her, whether he fully realized it or not. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. "Girl, where are you? You were supposed to text when you got home." Emma typed back quickly. "Long story. We'll explain tomorrow. I'm fine. Just dealing with something unexpected." Sarah's response was immediate. "Do I need to come over? Are you in trouble?" "No trouble, promise. Just being a good Samaritan. That's what worries me. Your good Samaritan thing always gets you into complicated situations." Emma smiled despite herself. Sarah wasn't wrong. But as she looked at the 3 little girls sleeping peacefully on her couch, she knew she'd made the right choice. The next morning arrived too quickly. Emma woke at 6 a.m. to find herself still in the armchair, her neck stiff and her back protesting. The girls were still asleep, though they'd rearranged themselves during the night. Lily was now sprawled across most of the couch, while Rose and Violet had somehow ended up on the floor, wrapped in blankets like small burritos. Emma moved quietly to the kitchen and started coffee. She had 3 hours before Dominic arrived. 3 hours to prepare herself and the girls for whatever came next. As the coffee brewed, she pulled out her phone and did something she probably should have done last night. She searched for information about Dominic Russo. The search results were extensive. Headlines from the past 6 months painted a picture. Russo custody battle continues. Deceased mother's family contests custody. Business magnate fights for daughters. Emma clicked on an article from a reputable news source. According to the article, Sophia Marino Russo had died in March after a vehicle collision in Manhattan. She'd been driving home from her job as an art teacher when a drunk driver crossed into her lane. She'd left behind 3 daughters and an ex-husband. The custody battle had begun almost immediately, with Sophia's sister Rebecca claiming that Dominic was unfit to raise the girls due to his questionable business associations and unstable lifestyle. The article went on to detail the Russo family history. Dominic's grandfather had immigrated from Italy in the 1950s and built a construction empire. His father had expanded into real estate and shipping, and Dominic, who'd taken over at age 25 after his father's sudden passing, had modernized the family businesses while maintaining their, Emma read between the lines, their less legitimate ventures. But there was nothing in any of the articles about Dominic being dangerous to his own children. No allegations of harm. No accusations beyond Rebecca's claims of unfitness. And interestingly, several articles mentioned anonymous sources saying Dominic had been working to legitimize family operations since taking over. Miss Emma? Emma looked up to find Violet standing in the kitchen doorway, her borrowed shirt hanging almost to her ankles, her dark hair a tangled mess. She looked impossibly small and vulnerable. "Good morning, sweetheart," Emma said, setting down her phone. "Did you sleep okay?" Violet nodded, then padded over and climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs. "Is Daddy coming today?" "He is. At 9 o'clock. Are you nervous?" "A little," Violet admitted. She picked at the edge of the table. "Miss Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think Daddy really loves us? Or was Aunt Rebecca telling the truth?" Emma's heart broke a little. She pulled out the chair next to Violet and sat down, choosing her words carefully. "Violet, I think your daddy loves you very much. I think he's been sad and confused since your mommy died. And sometimes when grown-ups are sad and confused, they don't know how to show love the right way. But that doesn't mean the love isn't there. Aunt Rebecca said he only wants us because of Mommy's money." Emma felt a flash of anger at this Rebecca woman, whoever she was. What kind of person said things like that to a 5-year-old child? "Did your daddy tell you he loves you last night?" Violet nodded slowly. "Did he look like he was lying?" "No," Violet whispered. "He looked like he was going to cry." "Then I think you have your answer," Emma said gently. "People don't cry about things they don't care about." By the time 7:30 rolled around, all 3 girls were awake. Emma had managed to wash their clothes from the night before using her small washing machine, and while they dried, the girls ate cereal in their borrowed t-shirts, watching morning cartoons with the intensity of children trying to ignore their anxiety. Emma was on her 2nd cup of coffee when her phone rang. This time, it was a number she recognized. Jake Martinez, an old friend from her first year in Brooklyn. He was a beat cop in the neighborhood, someone who'd helped her out when her apartment had been broken into 2 years ago. They'd stayed friendly, grabbing coffee occasionally when their schedules aligned. "Jake," Emma answered. "What's up?" "Emma, I need you to be straight with me." His voice was serious, professional. "Do you have 3 little girls at your apartment right now? The Russo triplets?" Emma's stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Because I just got a very interesting call from Dominic Russo's lawyer, asking me to do a welfare check on you and confirm that the children are safe." "Emma, what the hell is going on?" Emma stepped into her bedroom and closed the door, keeping her voice low. "It's complicated, Jake. The girls showed up at the diner last night, scared and alone. Their father showed up looking for them, but they were afraid of him. I offered to keep them overnight so everyone could calm down. He agreed. He's coming back this morning at 9. "Jesus, Emma." Jake sounded somewhere between impressed and exasperated. "Do you realize whose children those are? Do you have any idea what kind of family you're dealing with?" "I know exactly who they are," Emma said quietly. "And right now I don't care. Those girls needed help and I gave it to them. If Dominic Russo has a problem with that, he can take it up with me." There was a long pause. Then Jake sighed. "You're going to give me gray hair, you know that? All right, I'm coming over. I want to see the girls, make sure they're okay, and I want to be there when Russo shows up. Just as an official presence. To make sure everything stays civil." "Jake, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Because you're my friend and I'm not letting you face this alone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Officer Jake Martinez arrived at 8:15, carrying a box of donuts and wearing his uniform. He was a stocky man in his mid-30s with kind eyes and an easy smile that immediately put the girls at ease. "So you're the famous Triplets," Jake said, setting the donut box on the coffee table. "I'm Officer Jake. I work in this neighborhood and I'm friends with Miss Emma. I heard you had quite an adventure last night." The girls nodded solemnly, their eyes on the donuts. "Well, those are for you," Jake said. "And while you eat, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Over the next 20 minutes, Jake gently questioned the girls about what had happened at their aunt's house. Emma listened, learning details she hadn't known before. Apparently, Rebecca and her boyfriend Marcus had been fighting about money. The girls had heard Rebecca shouting that the brats were costing too much, that she couldn't wait until the trust fund came through so she could be done with this. Marcus had said something about getting rid of them sooner rather than later, which had terrified the girls. When Rose had accidentally knocked over a vase while trying to sneak away, Marcus had grabbed her wrist and yelled at her. That's when all three girls had run. Jake's expression grew darker as the story unfolded. He took careful notes, his professional demeanor never slipping, even as Emma could see the anger in his eyes. "Girls," Jake said when they finished, "you did exactly the right thing by running somewhere safe, and Miss Emma did the right thing by helping you. But I want you to know that you're safe now, okay? We're going to make sure nothing scary happens to you again." At 8:55, there was a knock at the door. Emma's heart jumped and she saw all three girls tense. Jake stood up, his hand resting casually on his belt in a gesture that Emma recognized as professional caution. "It's okay," Emma said, more to herself than to anyone else. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Dominic Russo stood in the hallway, but he looked different than he had last night. He was still wearing an expensive suit, navy blue this time, but his hair was slightly disheveled and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept. In his hands, he carried a folder and what looked like a stuffed animal. Emma opened the door. "You're early," she said. "I couldn't wait," Dominic admitted. His eyes moved past her, searching for his daughters. When he saw Jake in his police uniform, his expression tightened. "Officer, Mr. Russo," Jake said evenly. "I'm here in an unofficial capacity, just making sure everything proceeds smoothly. I appreciate your concern." Dominic's voice was polite but cool. "But this is a family matter. It became a police matter when 3 children ran away in fear," Jake countered. "So let's all stay calm, stay civil, and focus on what's best for the girls." Emma could feel the tension crackling between the two men, both territorial in different ways. She stepped between them, literally, and gestured to the living room. "Why don't we all sit down, girls? Your father is here." The triplets sat together on the couch, pressed close to each other. Dominic moved slowly into the room, as if approaching wild animals that might spook. He sat in the armchair Emma had occupied all night across from his daughters, and for a moment he just looked at them. "Hi," he said finally, his voice soft. "Did you sleep okay?" 3 small nods. "I brought you something." He held up the stuffed animal. Actually, Emma realized it was 3 stuffed animals. Small teddy bears, each wearing a different colored ribbon. "I remembered that you used to have bears like these when you were babies. I thought maybe you'd like new ones." Lily reached out tentatively and took the bear with the purple ribbon. Rose took the pink one and Violet the blue. They held them carefully as if they might break. Dominic opened the folder he'd brought. "I have everything you asked for, Emma. Custody documents, proof that Rebecca's temporary guardianship has been revoked, letters from my lawyer, character references." He pulled out paper after paper, spreading them on the coffee table. "I also have this." He pulled out a photograph and Emma's breath caught. It showed a younger Dominic, maybe 27 or 28, with a beautiful dark-haired woman and 3 tiny babies. They were at a park, and Dominic was laughing, holding one of the babies above his head, while the other 2 were cradled by their mother. The joy in the photo was almost painful to see. "This was taken 5 years ago," Dominic said, looking at his daughters. 6 months after you were born. It was the happiest day of my life. I want you to know that. Having you 3 was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Then why did you leave?" Lily asked, her voice small and hurt. Dominic's composure cracked. Emma saw his hands shake as he set down the photograph. "Because I was stupid. Because I thought your mother and I wanted different things, and I thought the best way to love you was from a distance, where my life couldn't touch yours." or the things I had to do, the choices I had to make wouldn't affect you. But we wanted you there, Rose said, tears streaming down her face. We wanted our daddy. I know. Dominic's voice broke. I know that now, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't change the past 5 years, but I can promise you this. I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be the father you deserve, if you'll give me the chance. Emma found herself crying too, despite her best efforts to remain professional and detached. Even Jake had to look away, his jaw tight with emotion. Violet slid off the couch, still clutching her blue-ribboned bear. She walked slowly to her father, and Emma held her breath. Dominic held perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might scare her away. Can I ask you something, Daddy? Violet said. Anything, baby. Anything. Are you going to leave again? If we go with you, will you stay this time? It was the question that mattered most, Emma realized. The question that would determine everything. Dominic got down on his knees so he was eye level with his daughter. I'm going to tell you the truth, Violet. There will be times when I have to work, times when I have to go to meetings or handle business. But I will never, ever leave you the way I did before. You will wake up in my house every morning. You will have breakfast with me. I will take you to school and pick you up. I will read you bedtime stories and be there when you have nightmares. I will be your father, not just in name, but in every way that matters. Promise? Violet whispered. I promise. Dominic held out his hand, his pinky finger extended. Pinky promise. Violet hooked her small finger around his, and something in the room shifted. Rose and Lily came to join their sister, and suddenly Dominic was surrounded by his daughters, all of them crying and hugging and trying to fit into his arms all at once. Emma turned away, giving them privacy in their moment. She found Jake watching her, a knowing look in his eyes. You did good, he murmured. This is how it should have gone. I hope so, Emma whispered back. After several minutes, Dominic gently disentangled himself and stood, his daughters holding onto his hands. He looked at Emma, and there was something in his expression, gratitude, respect, and something else she couldn't quite name. Thank you, he said, for everything, for protecting them, for giving me this chance. Take care of them, Emma said simply. That's all the thanks I need. I will. He paused, then added, if there's ever anything you need, Emma Carter, anything at all, you call me. He handed her a business card with a phone number handwritten on the back. That's my personal cell. It's always on, for emergencies, for questions, for anything. Emma took the card, feeling the weight of what he was really offering. A connection, a lifeline, a promise of protection if she ever needed it. As Dominic prepared to leave with the girls, helping them into their now dry clothes from last night, Emma felt an unexpected pang. In less than 24 hours, these 3 little girls had somehow become important to her. The thought of them walking out her door felt wrong, incomplete. Miss Emma? Lily tugged on her sleeve as they were leaving. Can we come visit you at the diner? I would love that, Emma said, crouching down to hug all 3 of them. Anytime you want. And you know what? Hot chocolate is always free for my favorite triplets. We're your only triplets, Violet giggled, which makes you automatically my favorites. Emma smiled. At the door, Dominic paused. This isn't over, you know. Rebecca will challenge the custody change. There will be hearings, probably a court battle. It could get messy. Then handle it, Emma said firmly. And in the meantime, be their father. That's all that matters. As they disappeared down the stairs, Jake let out a low whistle. Well, that was intense. You just became best friends with one of the most powerful families in Brooklyn. That's either the smartest or the stupidest thing you've ever done. Time will tell, Emma said. But as she closed the door and looked at her empty apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet understand. Across the street, in a black sedan that had been parked there all night, a man lowered his camera. He'd captured everything. Dominic's arrival, the emotional reunion, the way Emma had orchestrated it all. He pulled out his phone and dialed. It's me, he said when someone answered. You were right. The waitress is the key to getting to Russo, and I think I know exactly how to use her. He ended the call, started the engine, and drove away slowly, leaving behind nothing but tire tracks in the morning rain. Emma wiped down the counter at Rosie's diner for what felt like the 100th time that afternoon. The lunch rush had ended an hour ago, and now the diner sat in that familiar mid-afternoon lull, with only 2 customers, Mr. Peterson reading his newspaper in booth 3, and Mrs. Chen working on a crossword puzzle at the counter. The bell above the door chimed and Emma looked up out of habit. Her face broke into a genuine smile. "Well, if it isn't my favorite customers," she said as Lily, Rose, and Violet came rushing through the door, their faces bright with excitement. "Miss Emma," they chorused, running to the counter. They'd grown comfortable with her over the past 2 weeks, visiting the diner almost every other day after their preschool program ended. Dominic followed behind them, looking significantly different than he had that first stormy night. He was dressed more casually today, dark jeans and a gray sweater instead of his usual suits. The permanent tension in his shoulders had eased somewhat, and when he smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, the expression actually reached his eyes. "Hope we're not interrupting," Dominic said, sliding onto a stool while the girls climbed onto the ones beside him. "Never," Emma assured them. "Hot chocolate for the girls?" "Yes, please." Violet bounced excitedly on her seat. "And for you?" Emma asked Dominic. "Coffee, black, strong." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "It's been a long day." As Emma prepared their drinks, she noticed the manila envelope Dominic had placed on the counter. Her stomach tightened. Over the past 2 weeks, those envelopes had become familiar, always containing legal documents, court notices, or updates about the custody situation. "Bad news?" she asked quietly, setting the hot chocolates in front of the girls with extra marshmallows. "Could be worse," Dominic said, accepting his coffee gratefully. "The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week. Rebecca's lawyer is claiming I'm an unfit parent due to my unstable work schedule and questionable associations." He said the last part with bitter sarcasm. Emma glanced at the girls, but they were absorbed in their hot chocolate and a coloring book that Emma kept behind the counter, specifically for their visits. "And your lawyer says that we have a strong case. The girls are happy, healthy, attending school regularly. I've documented everything, every meal, every bedtime story, every parent-teacher meeting. I even hired a child psychologist to evaluate them, and her report says they're thriving." Dominic took a long drink of coffee. "But Rebecca's painting a picture of me as some kind of, well, you know what she's implying." Emma did know. The newspapers had been following the case with uncomfortable interest. "Crime boss or caring father," one headline had read. "Custody battle reveals dark family history," claimed another. Emma had stopped reading them after the third article that implied Dominic was dangerous simply because of his last name. "The truth will come out," Emma said firmly. "Anyone who sees you with those girls knows you're a good father." Speaking of which, Dominic pulled another paper from the envelope. "My lawyer thinks it would help our case if we had a character witness. Someone outside the family who's observed my relationship with the girls. Someone who has no reason to lie for me." Emma felt her heart skip. "You want me to testify? Only if you're comfortable with it. I know I'm asking a lot. You've already done so much." Dominic's dark eyes met hers. "But Emma, you're the one person who saw us at our worst and our best. You saw how scared they were, and you've seen how far we've come. Your testimony could make a real difference." Before Emma could answer, the bell chimed again. A woman in an expensive pantsuit entered, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She had dark hair pulled back severely and carried a leather briefcase that screamed, "Lawyer." Emma recognized her immediately from the news coverage. This was Patricia Hoffman, Rebecca's attorney. "Mr. Russo," the woman said coolly. "How convenient to find you here. And with the children, no less." Her eyes swept dismissively over the diner's modest interior before landing on Emma. "You must be the waitress." Emma felt Dominic tense beside her. "Ms. Hoffman," he said, his voice dropping into that dangerous tone Emma had heard the first night. "This is neither the time nor the place. On the contrary, I think it's the perfect place." Patricia Hoffman pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of Dominic and the girls at the counter. "Establishing patterns is crucial for custody cases. The court will be very interested to know you're bringing the children to a diner in a questionable neighborhood instead of providing proper afternoon activities. This is Park Slope, not a war zone," Emma said sharply. "And there's nothing wrong with children visiting a diner. Ms. Carter, is it?" Patricia's smile was thin and cold. "I'll be honest with you. My client has informed me of your involvement in this situation. Quite the white knight, aren't you? Inserting yourself into a family matter that doesn't concern you." "Those girls were terrified and alone," Emma said, her voice steady despite her rising anger. "I did what anyone with a conscience would do, or what someone looking for a connection to a wealthy family would do," Patricia countered. "Tell me, Ms. Carter, has Mr. Russo compensated you for your services that night?" Paid you to testify on his behalf? That's enough. Dominic stood, and despite his casual clothes, he suddenly seemed to fill the entire diner with his presence. You want to come after me in court? Fine. But you leave Emma out of this. She's done nothing except help 3 children who needed it. We'll see what the judge thinks, Patricia said. She pulled a document from her briefcase and handed it to Dominic. You've been served. That's a motion for emergency custody transfer. We're claiming that bringing the children to establishments like this demonstrates poor judgment and potential risk to their well-being. Emma watched Dominic's jaw clench, saw his hands tighten on the paper, but he didn't explode, didn't threaten, didn't do any of the things that Patricia Hoffman was clearly hoping for. Instead, he very calmly folded the document and placed it in his jacket pocket. Thank you for the delivery, he said. Now get out of my sight before I forget my manners. Patricia smiled like she'd won something and left, her heels clicking all the way to her Mercedes parked illegally at the curb. Through the window, Emma watched her drive away, still smiling. Daddy? Lily's small voice broke the tension. Is that the lady who wants to take us away? Dominic immediately shifted gears, crouching down to his daughter's level. That's Aunt Rebecca's lawyer, yes. But remember what we talked about? No one is going to take you away, I promise. But what if the judge believes her? Rose's eyes were wide with worry. What if they think we should go back to Aunt Rebecca's? That's not going to happen, Dominic said firmly, because we're going to tell the judge the truth. And the truth is that you're happy, healthy, and exactly where you belong. After the girls had finished their hot chocolate and Dominic had paid, leaving a tip that was probably triple the bill, they prepared to leave. But Dominic lingered at the counter while the girls looked at the old jukebox in the corner. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. About Hoffman. She's trying to provoke me, trying to get me to do something stupid that she can use in court. I can testify, Emma heard herself say. If you think it'll help, I'll do it. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. You understand what you're agreeing to. They'll dig into your life, your past. They'll try to discredit you, make you look unreliable or biased. It won't be pleasant. I don't care, Emma said. Those girls deserve to be with their father. I saw how scared they were that night, but I've also seen how happy they are now. That's the truth, and I'm not afraid to say it in court. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper. Respect, perhaps. Or the beginning of trust. Thank you, he said simply. I won't forget this. The next few days brought unexpected complications. Emma arrived at the diner on Thursday morning to find her boss, Frank, waiting for her with a grim expression. Frank was in his 60s, a former Marine who'd run Rosie's diner for 30 years. He was usually gruff but fair, and Emma had never seen him look quite this uncomfortable. Emma, we need to talk, he said, gesturing to a booth. Emma's stomach sank. What's wrong? Frank pulled out a newspaper and slid it across the table. There, on page 6 of the local section, was a photograph. Emma and Dominic at the counter, the girls between them, all of them smiling. The headline read, Diner Waitress Caught in Russo Custody Battle. Emma scanned the article quickly. It detailed her involvement in the case, speculated about her relationship with Dominic, and included quotes from anonymous sources suggesting she was trying to ingratiate herself with the Russo family for financial gain. This isn't. Emma couldn't find words for her outrage. I believe you, Frank said. But Emma, you've got to understand my position. This diner is a neighborhood institution. We can't afford to be associated with controversy. I've already had 3 customers call this morning asking if it's true, if we're somehow connected to the Russo family. So what are you saying? Emma asked, though she already knew. I'm saying I need you to distance yourself from this situation. No more visits from Russo and his kids, no testifying in court. Just let it go, Emma. I can't do that, Emma said immediately. Those girls need someone on their side. Someone who isn't connected to all the family politics and power struggles. Frank sighed heavily. Then I'm sorry, but I can't keep you on staff. The diner's reputation is all we have, and I can't risk it. Emma felt like she'd been punched. You're firing me? For helping children? I'm firing you for bringing unwanted attention to my business, Frank corrected. But he looked miserable about it. I'll give you 2 weeks' pay and a good reference. But Emma, this is final. Walking out of the diner that afternoon felt surreal. Emma had spent 3 years here, had built friendships with regular customers, had made this place a second home. Now it was gone, because she'd chosen to do the right thing. She was sitting on the steps outside her apartment, trying to process everything, when a familiar black car pulled up. Dominic emerged, took one look at her face, and immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside her. Emma told him everything. The newspaper article, Frank's ultimatum, her termination. Dominic's expression grew darker with every word. "I'll fix this," he said when she finished. "I'll talk to Frank, make him understand." "No," Emma interrupted. "That'll just make it worse. It'll look like you're using your influence to intimidate him. That's exactly what Rebecca's lawyer wants. Then I'll find you another job. Better pay, better hours." "Dominic, stop." Emma looked at him directly. "I don't want your charity. I don't want you solving my problems. I made a choice, and I'll deal with the consequences." He studied her for a long moment. "You're really something. You know that? Most people in this city would kill for the kind of help I'm offering." "I'm not most people," Emma said. "And besides, I'll be fine. I have savings. I'll find another job. What matters is that we focus on the hearing next week." About that, Dominic pulled out his phone and showed her an email. "My lawyer wants to meet with you tomorrow. Go over your testimony, prepare you for cross-examination. She's good, Emma, really good. She'll make sure you're ready." "Tomorrow works?" Emma said. "I've got plenty of free time now." Dominic smiled slightly at her dark humor, then grew serious again. "I need to tell you something. About Rebecca and Marcus, her boyfriend. My investigator's been digging into their finances. And there's a trust fund. $2 million that Sophia set up for the girls. Rebecca was named as trustee until the girls turn 18, but only if she has custody. If I have custody, the trustee role transfers to me." Emma felt understanding dawn. "So this whole custody battle isn't really about the girls at all. It's about money," Dominic confirmed bitterly. "It's always about money. My investigator found evidence that Rebecca and Marcus have been living off the trust's allowance, spending it on themselves instead of the girls. Vacations, a new car, expensive dinners. When I filed for custody, they panicked. Can you prove it? We're working on it. But bank records take time and the hearing is in 6 days." Dominic ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "I just need the judge to see the truth, that those girls belong with me, not with people who see them as a meal ticket." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the neighborhood come alive with the evening rush, people coming home from work, kids playing in the street, the normal rhythms of life continuing despite their personal dramas. "I've been thinking," Emma said slowly, "about what you said that first night, about being angry, about turning into your father." Dominic tensed. "What about it?" "You're not him," Emma said simply. "I never met your father, but I've watched you with those girls. You're patient. You're trying. You ask them about their day and actually listen to the answers. You let them paint your nails pink last Tuesday. I saw the photos Violet showed me." Despite everything, Dominic laughed. "That was a negotiation tactic. They wanted ice cream before dinner. I said no. They countered with nail polish. It seemed like the lesser evil. My point is, you're present, you're learning. That's what good fathers do." Emma looked at him earnestly. "So stop punishing yourself for not being perfect. Those girls don't need perfect. They just need you." Dominic met her eyes, and Emma saw something vulnerable there, something raw. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing that, for believing it." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You should stay out of things that don't concern you. This is your only warning." Emma's blood ran cold. She showed Dominic the message and his expression immediately hardened. "That's Marcus," he said, "Rebecca's boyfriend. My security team has been tracking him. He's been following you." "What?" Emma's hand tightened on her phone. "For how long?" 3 days. I was going to tell you tonight. Offer you protection." Dominic's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Emma, these people are desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. So what do I do?" "You let me help you," Dominic said firmly. "I'm putting a security detail on you. Just one person, discreet, keeping an eye out. And I want you to vary your route home, stay in public places, keep your phone charged." Emma wanted to argue, to insist she could take care of herself, but the text message had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. "Okay," she said, "but just until the hearing is over." "Deal." Dominic stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, I'm taking you to dinner. A thank you for everything you've done, and so we can go over the testimony together." "Dominic, I don't think it's just dinner, Emma. Between friends. Or are we not friends yet?" Emma looked up at him, this complicated man who'd burst into her life 2 weeks ago and turned everything upside down. Friends seemed too simple a word for what they were becoming, but it would do for now. "Friends?" she agreed, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. But you're buying, since I'm currently unemployed. Deal, Dominic said, and his smile was genuine. I know a place. Best Italian food in Brooklyn. And don't worry, it's owned by my cousin. Completely legitimate, I promise. As they walked to his car, Emma caught sight of another vehicle parked down the street, a dark sedan with tinted windows. She couldn't see the driver, but she could feel eyes watching them. The game was changing, she realized. What had started as a simple act of kindness was becoming something bigger, something potentially dangerous. But as she glanced at Dominic, saw the determined set of his jaw, she knew she wasn't backing down. Those 3 little girls deserved a father who loved them, and Emma would do whatever it took to make sure they got exactly that, even if it meant facing down threats, lawyers, and the ghosts of Brooklyn's most infamous family. The preliminary hearing was 6 days away. Emma had a feeling those 6 days would change everything. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of what was now called 3 Roses Cafe, illuminating the freshly painted walls and new booths. Emma stood behind the counter, smiling as she watched the scene before her. Dominic sat in the corner booth with Lily, Rose, and Violet, helping them with their homework. Gone was the tense, distant man from that stormy night. In his place was a father who knew his daughter's favorite foods, their bedtime routines, and every word to their favorite songs. The custody hearing had been decisive. Rebecca and Marcus's financial records revealed years of misappropriation. The judge had awarded Dominic full custody within 20 minutes. Rebecca faced fraud charges, while Marcus had left the state entirely. "Miss Emma?" Violet called out. "Daddy says we can have pancakes. Does he now?" Emma laughed, catching Dominic's eye. He shrugged with a sheepish grin. When Frank had retired, Dominic had bought the diner and offered Emma full partnership. She'd accepted, but only as a true business partner. Equal investment, equal say. The cafe was thriving, a neighborhood gathering place where everyone was welcome. "Emma," Dominic said softly, as she brought over a fresh pot of coffee. "Thank you, for everything, for saving us that night." "You saved yourselves," Emma replied. "I just gave you the space to find each other again." Rose tugged Emma's sleeve. "Are you going to be our new mommy?" Emma and Dominic both froze, then laughed nervously. Their relationship had grown into something deep and meaningful. Whether it became romantic was a question for another day. "How about we start with best friend?" Emma suggested gently. "Works for me," Dominic said, his eyes warm. Outside, Brooklyn continued its morning rhythm. But inside 3 Roses Cafe, a new family had been born. Not through blood, but through courage, trust, and the belief that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your door to someone in need.